Let's start by cleaning null values using, you could say, a technique that replaces the column by a measure of central tendency. And so I almost always use the median. So I'm actually going to put that in the text header, subheader. So clean null values by median. And what that means is we're going to replace the null values by the median of the column. Now, you may wonder, wait, why don't we just get rid of the rows? Well, you could, okay? But we're not going to do that as a practice because generally speaking, we're going to embrace the idea that there's valuable data there and we actually want to keep it, right? It may have significant information in other columns. So it is actually standard to often keep, the null values by replacing them by a measure of central tendency. The idea being, well, I don't know what it is. So if I take the average, there's likely to be more gain by keeping it than by getting rid of it entirely. Now, it really just depends on the data. If it was very sparse, meaning like a lot of null values in a given row, I would probably just get rid of it, but not here. So how do we do this? Well, first thing we should do is access the median, and we need to know the column that we're going to change. Let's just do the one that is the most of them. Let's start with wind speed. Okay, so what is the median of wind speed? Well, let me show you how to do that. Again, you access the column using this bracket notation. You put in quotes, and then you can type in wind speed, which I believe is the name. It didn't give it to me like that, so sometimes I pause. Sometimes Colab prompts you, sometimes it loses you. And then there is a method .median. So I press Shift Enter, I get the median of the wind speed. Great. So that's the value I want to replace. Now, we don't want to copy that value and we want to use that variable. Okay? You always want to use your notation, like your Python notation, and not write in the numbers. Because if you're writing in the numbers, it's not going to carry over if you get more rows, say, and it changes like that. So the strategy for this is the following. Okay, so now we're going to replace null values in wind speed column with median. Okay, it should be, of course, of that column. By the way, I try to be consistent sometimes with my comments, or if I'm going to start with capitals and then go lowercase, try to do that consistently. So how do I do that? Well, first, again, I want to get the column, right? It's df wind speed, right? That is the correct column. And then there's a method called .fillNA. Okay, and so what that's going to do, that's going to fill the null values with whatever I specify inside of it. Well, what I want to specify is what's above it, the df wind speed .median. So if I want, I could copy that. I could also rewrite it or reassign it to another variable, and I put it in there. So that's going to do it, okay? With one little addition I do want to make. It's not going to overwrite the data frame unless you add something called in place equals true. Okay? So by adding that, and I'll go ahead and press return so you can see it. And when you're writing functions, you can press return after a comma and it'll preserve everything. Method is a kind of a function. That's going to be something we'll see again in pandas. It's just basically overwrites the data frame. That's what it does. Okay, so I press Shift Enter, no errors, so that's a good sign. Easy to get errors here because there's a lot of code, so double check things carefully. And the last thing I'm going to do is actually check it, right? Did it work? Well, I'd like to actually see it in the rows where it happened. Okay, so I can go back up. Presumably they're not null values anymore, but they were recorded when I showed them all here. So look at this, rows 56, 81, and 128, I believe, all had null values. So I'm going to show those rows. These are the indices of those rows, and at pandas you can show rows by index. So here we go. So show, you could say replace, show rows that were changed. Okay. So it's simply the whole data frame, and it uses what's called .iloc. That stands for index location. And then you put the indices, it's row, comma, column, or if you just want to show all the columns, you can put just the row in, which I'll do. But the row here is a list of numbers. Okay? So it's got to go in its own, like it's a list inside of the brackets here. Okay, a list of numbers. So I got to check it again. What were the indices? I want 56, 81, and 128. So I can put those in there. 56, 81, 128. Press Shift Enter. Let's see what it shows. There are the rows showing all the columns. And by the way, I don't know the number of the index wind speed. There's another way that you can show it. And look, it's been replaced with the median. Very cool. Very cool. I think we can try it because technically speaking, like how to show just the wind speed, I personally like looking at all of it. But the idea would be this: the name of the rows are the same as the index. Okay, we don't have a different one here. So we should be able to do it using .loc. Let me show you what I mean. If I copy this in and I change it to .loc, now location is usually by name. Those are the rows, and so I can try comma, column wind speed. Let's see if that works. It does. It shows only that column. I personally like to see everything because it makes me feel more confident about it. But this is how you would show, you could say values using loc, which are, say, it's basically like name of row and then name of column. And note that lists do work as the input. So that's how you replace your null values with the measure of central tendency. You could use .mean if you really want to. I tend to use .median because it's robust against outliers.